Imagine two very distinct scenarios. First is a war zone. You can hear muffled gunfire coming from every direction. Horizon is filled with plumes of black smoke carrying sorrow to heaven. Everything around you is destroyed. Buildings that once reached toward the sky just like the ambitions that built them are now mere tombstones, reminding you of the horrors of war. Each wall is riddled with bullets. You can count every single one of them if you came closer. But you don't. You're afraid, because you know that one of those bullets was meant for you. Second scenario is a fantasy world. Imagine a sky as green as the grass you walk on every day. Trees the size of a building growing from the sky and toward the ground. Plants of curious nature and strange purpose, each more beautiful and intricate than the next. Creatures you have not seen even in your own imagination. Some big yet friendly, grazing on a field near you. Others tiny yet ferocious, waiting for an opportune moment to attack and devour you whole. So, here's a question. Which one of these two scenarios is real? Or rather, which one of these two scenarios is realistic? Most of us don't even need to think to answer that question. And most of us would say first scenario. The curious part about this is that we know it innately, through our experiences, through our memories, through deduction and simple logic. The answer comes to us just like that. But that line of reasoning only applies when no context is given to us. And without context, we'll look at it through the lens of our reality. We know war is real, we know how it looks, how it feels, and we certainly know the consequences. Trees growing out of the sky, on the other hand, is definitely made up. But what if I gave you context? So here's a question one more time. Which one of these two scenarios is realistic within a narrative? Now the answer is not as obvious, is it? That's because within a fictional narrative, a line between what is real and what isn't is rather blurred. We've all seen movies or played games with fantastical elements in them, everything from Star Wars and Mass Effect when it comes to science fiction, all the way to Lord of the Rings and Skyrim when it comes to fantasy. We've experienced the impossible technology and seen the creatures of myth. We've bent the rules of science and opened portals into other worlds. But if we know that all these things are not real within the context of our shared reality, why do we accept them as such within the context of fiction? An answer many will most likely share is that we simply choose to. We like believing in the unbelievable. Our own reality is very limited, especially today in the age of internet and sharing and easy access to information. Experiencing various aspects of life has not been easier. So what do we do when reality becomes boring? We make a new one. Reality governed by our rules, inhabited by people and creatures that we like. Reality expanded beyond the edges of our universe, yet easily available to anyone. That's called escapism, an ability to leave our own reality for something a lot more exciting. That's why movies and games are so immensely popular. They open paths into unbelievable worlds where we can experience interesting characters, engaging storylines, and see things we would never see in our ordinary lives. Doing that provides us with very powerful and lasting effects. It helps us battle stress and our day-to-day monotony. It helps us cope with hardship or even face it. It helps relax and enjoy the small things. And it has been with us since the day we learned to tell stories. But as we all know, not every story manages to pull us in. Not every character excites us, and not every world is fun to explore. And that's because not every writer is good enough to create a world. See, that's the real answer to my question. Why do we accept fantastical elements as real in the context of fiction? That's because writers make us believe those elements are real. When we see a dragon in Skyrim or a lightsaber in Star Wars, we don't dismiss them as unrealistic. On the contrary, we embrace them and give them value, often a lot of it. I mean, lightsaber is the most iconic weapon in history, and it's made up. That's the power of believability. The most crazy ideas can often create the most interesting worlds if only writers do a good enough job. That's why Lord of the Rings is celebrated all around the globe. There is magic, there are dozens of mythical beasts, There are different races and unbelievable locales, and yet we believe it all. And that's all thanks to the quality of writing, how complex and multi-layered characters are, how well defined the rules of that world are, how unique and distinct every location is, how well formed and well characterized each creature is. The rules, traditions, and history of each race and each people, and most importantly, how well each and every element is intertwined with one another. That's what creates believability, and that's what makes these worlds real. So let's try again. Which one of these two scenarios is real? First one, second, both, none? I think I made it even worse, didn't I? See, most people have very different interpretations of what is real, especially when we're talking about work of fiction. My dad, for example, does not accept science fiction or fantasy. To him, it's some nonsense created for children. So if I address this question to him, he would still say that the first scenario is the real one, because the first scenario is closest to real world. These are the limitations some people put on work of fiction. If it's outside the realm of our own world and our understanding of it, it is simply not acceptable to them. And in my humble opinion, these are the people without imagination. When they watch Matrix, for example, and see all those insane tricks Neo can do, they don't see those tricks in the world of Matrix, but rather in the real world, thus losing any kind of context. Of course, it is going to look silly and nonsensical if you think about that movie in the context of our shared reality, but it does not take place in our reality. It takes place in the reality called Matrix, and that little nuance is lost on them, unfortunately. Others see realism in authenticity. Let's say my first example is based in Call of Duty or Battlefield games. Authenticity plays a major part in those franchises. How authentic weapons look and handle, the recoil, reloading, how accurate they are. Sounds they make are almost essential. God forbid that MP4 does not make an authentic firing sound. Or vehicles. Some people study screenshots and compare them to real tanks, cars, or planes, and then go online to complain about some minute and insignificant detail the developers have missed. Is that realism? Then there's another form of realism some developers have been obsessed with. All you can hear them talk about is polygons, and how many of them there are. They try to simulate human skin, human eyes, human expressions, human movement, and more often than not, they find themselves deep inside the uncanny valley. For those who don't know, uncanny valley is an idea that the more human-like robots and CGI models get, the less human they look. Can that be considered realism? So, another try. Which one of these two scenarios is real? Even I'm confused now. So how about I ask another question? Does it matter? Is realism as important as we make it out to be? And if you say yes, you have a lot of explaining to do. I mean, how many times have you been brought to tears by something animated? Let's look at some simple examples. Monsters Incorporated from Disney, for instance. Most of the main characters in that animated movie are not even human. The world they live in is ridiculous, their jobs are outright absurd, yet we still get emotionally involved with them. We care about them. We want them to succeed and we don't want them to get hurt. And they are not even real. What about Lion King? These are animals we're talking about, animals. Or Wall-E. He's a tiny garbage collecting robot that makes us feel things not many humans can evoke. We have talking animals, we have anthropomorphized toys, we have robots with thoughts and monsters with jobs. We even have singing snowmen, for crying out loud. Millions of people around the world care immensely about these characters, yet none of them are real or realistic. Gaming is especially guilty of overemphasizing realism. Everything has to look realistic. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every wrinkle or pimple, every bloody cell, and every goddamn atom. So isn't it ironic when games like Thomas Was Alone can invoke more emotions than big AAA franchises? And that game is about geometric shapes, for crying out loud. So maybe we've been looking at it all wrong. Maybe realism is not about how real things look, but rather how real they feel. That would explain a lot, wouldn't it? That would definitely explain the ease with which we overcome the barrier between reality and fantasy, how easily we embrace it. Robot, alien, animal, or a creature of myth, it doesn't matter how they look, only what they feel. Because we feel the same way. We can relate to them, we can see ourselves in them, despite how differently we look. We can understand pain, joy, happiness, and love. We can be as afraid as they are or as excited as they are. We can have similar thoughts or share outlooks on life, and it doesn't matter how many eyes they have, or limbs, or how different their physiology is to ours. All that matters is that we can relive the same emotions, and those are definitely real. So, for the last time, which one of these two scenarios is real? For the longest time, my biggest problem with realism was that I could not define it. Every single person has their own interpretation of that word. Aggregating them all and making a conclusion is outright impossible. So let me share my own interpretation, and you be the judge. The more I looked, the clearer the conclusion was becoming that realism is a visual manifestation. It is purely superficial. It's all about how much something reminds us of real world. And since it is purely visual, it is also purely subjective. Different people put different value into how things look. That's why believability is a much more valuable asset to invest in. Believability goes beyond visual aesthetic, encompassing every single aspect of narrative, world, characters, interactions, creatures, etc. And most importantly, believability is all about emotional connections. How real something is just doesn't matter. It will become real anyways if authors and developers made you believe in it. So, my name is AJ. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.